Hello there, and welcome to this video on the Daystate Blackwolf. In today's video I'm going to be fitting the VolumeX system to the rifle, as well as giving you some information on it and some troubleshooting tips. Now before we get into the installation process, there are a few things that I would like to go over. So firstly, the primary function of the VolumeX system is to increase the overall plenum size of the rifle. From the factory, the Blackwolf has a plenum size of 52 cc's, and the VolumeX system adds another 70 cc's of air to the rifle. So in total, with the VolumeX system fitted, the rifle has 122 cc's of air available to the back of the valve. The extra air is incredibly useful for the high power and FAC rifles, as it increases the maximum potential power of the rifle, or if you're happy with the current power of the rifle, it will allow you to achieve it more efficiently. So in other words, you'll get more shots per fill. With that said, there are just two more things I want to mention about the VolumeX system. Firstly, this is only available for the chassis rifles. The VolumeX system will not fit in the stock, so if you have a stocked rifle, the VolumeX system cannot be fitted. The other thing that I want to mention is that it's not recommended for fitment on the sub 12 pound rifles. So this upgrade here is purely and solely aimed at the high power and FAC market. With that all said and done, we can start on the installation process. The first thing we're going to be doing is making the rifle safe to work on by first cocking the rifle, removing the single shot loader or magazine if one has been fitted. Then we can dry fire the rifle into a nice safe backstop. What this does is ensure that there's not a pellet loaded into the barrel and that the rifle is safe to work on. The next thing to do would be to remove the action from the chassis, although I've already done that on this particular rifle just to save us a little bit of time. The next thing we're going to do is fully degas the rifle, and that's done by the use of a deep 10mm socket. What we're going to do here is just crack the Foster fitting on the bottom of the rifle loose. What you would need to do then is simply wait for the rifle to fully degas and then check both gauges. So this one on this side shows us the bottle pressure, and then the gauge on the other side of the rifle shows us reg pressure. Both of these gauges here would need to read 0 before anything else happens to the rifle. If after loosening the Foster fitting on the bottom of the rifle, the regulator gauge still sees pressure, what you'd need to do then is come to the back of the rifle, reduce the hammer spring setting to minimum, then dry fire the rifle into a nice safe backstop until this gauge on this side reads 0 bar. To save us a little bit of time, I've already gone ahead and done all those steps, so we're nice and safe to proceed. The next thing I'm going to do is remove the barrel, as this makes it a little easier to remove the bottle. So if we come on top here, we can see two grub screws. We need to loosen these using a 3mm Allen key. They don't need to be removed fully, just a couple of turns, then we should be able to slide the barrel out from the front of the action, and we can put that nice and safely over to one side. The next thing we'll do is unscrew the bottle from the front of the rifle, and these can be done up quite tight from the factory. What you may have to do is grip the action in a vise with some nice soft jaw protection, then loosen the bottle from the front. It is sometimes easier to get a set of nitrile gloves on and then unscrew the bottle so your hands don't slip. With that done, the next thing we'll do is remove this front block here, and that's done by removing the 4 screws in the front of the block using a 4mm Allen key. With the 4 bolts removed, they can be put nice and safely over to one side, as with the new VolumeX system you do get replacement bolts. With that said, we can remove the front block from the rifle. I'll just get you a quick look at that here. So just making sure this O-ring is in place, and whilst we're here I'm going to go ahead and retighten the Foster fitting on the bottom of the rifle, just so I don't forget. Next we can bring over the VolumeX system, and before we get that installed we are just going to make sure this O-ring in the front of the block is seated correctly. So just make sure that's installed and in the block like so. The next thing we're going to be doing is putting a little bit of silicone grease around this front boss O-ring in the front of the block. With that done, we can take our VolumeX system, put that in the front of the block just like so. Then we can add our front block to it. Again, I'm just going to be putting a small amount of silicone grease around this boss here. Then we can get that pushed into place. We can line everything up roughly with the front of the block, then drop in the 4 screws. Right then, and there we have it. There's the front block and the VolumeX system installed onto the rifle. What you saw me do then was get each of the 4 screws started, wound in until they touched the front block, checked the alignment between the 2 blocks to make sure everything was nicely aligned, then I went round and tightened everything up. What we can do now is get our bottle reinstalled, and before that goes on, I am just going to be adding a small amount of silicone grease to this O-ring around the front of the bottle adapter. Then we can get that screwed into place. With that done, the last thing we can add is the barrel to the top of the rifle. And what we're going to do first is locate these 2 grub screw dimples here, get those aligned with the top of the block, then gently push the barrel into position. With that done, we can get the grub screws done up with a 3mm Allen key. Right then, and there we have it. There's the VolumeX system fitted to the front of the rifle. The next step would be to gas the rifle back up again via the Foster fitting in the bottom of the action, and then check for any leaks. Once the rifle had been fully leak tested, then it would be time to reinstall the action into the stock. Before I go ahead and do that on this particular rifle, I am very briefly going to go over the seal locations and what happens if each one of them fails. What we'll do is start at the front and then move back. So to begin with, we have these cylinders, one on either side. Both of these cylinders here have the end cap, which contains an O-ring that seals on the inside of the cylinder. If this O-ring has failed, you'll have air leaking out of the joint of these 2 components here. Similarly, at the back of the cylinder, there is a seal between the main block and the cylinder, and if this seal has failed, you'll have air leaking out of this joint here. On the body of the VolumeX system, we also have these 4 blanking plates here. These each have an O-ring beneath them, and the blanks themselves can be removed using a 5mm Allen key. If any one of these blanks have failed, you'll have air leaking out of the joint between the 2 components. Moving on from that, we have 2 seals on the body itself, one between the VolumeX system and the regulator and bottle housing, and the other between the VolumeX system and the block of the rifle. If the forwardmost O-ring has failed, you'll have a leak of air emanating from the joint of these 2 components, and if the O-ring between the block and the VolumeX system has failed, you'll have air leaking from the joint of the 2 components. With that all said and done, that's pretty much going to do it for this particular video. So thank you very much for watching. I hope it's been interesting or useful, and I'll see you in the next one.